Nothing ever happens at Vexler Academy until the cameras glitched and 3 students were carried to medical. My name's Krill, by the way, and I'm what you'd call a professional observer. Third shift security technician, which is a fancy way of saying I sit in a cramped office and stare at screens while the rest of the station sleeps. Now, here's the thing about working security at the most prestigious interspecies academy in the Galactic Collective. Nothing ever happens. Nothing. These are the cream of the crop. The brightest minds from 200 different worlds, all here to learn advanced physics, quantum mechanics, and how to not accidentally insult someone's religious customs during lunch. The wildest incident we'd had in my entire tenure was when a Zephrani student got drunk on fermented plant matter and tried to declare the cafeteria an independent nation. That's it. That's the highlight reel. So when I came in for my shift rotation on cycle day 8047, standard galactic calendar, I expected the usual mind-numbing routine: check the overnight logs, scan through flagged incidents, which is usually just someone forgetting their access card, make sure the environmental systems didn't glitch and freeze anyone's dormitory. Standard stuff, you know, except something was flagged. Red priority. Critical review required. I stared at that little blinking indicator on my console like it had personally insulted my entire family line. Red priority. Here, we don't get red priority. We get slightly elevated yellow because someone left a door propped open. Priority. Red means something went wrong, really properly spectacularly wrong. The timestamp showed the incident occurred at 16:47 hours the previous cycle, right after advanced engineering classes let out. Location: Maintenance Corridor 7. Subsection Delta. That's the back hallway near the practical labs. The one students use as a shortcut between the engineering wing and the main atrium. Cameras everywhere. Full coverage, multiple angles. Our surveillance net there is absolutely flawless. And I mean flawless because the Academy board spent an obscene amount of credits making sure we could monitor every centimeter of this facility. So naturally, the footage was corrupted. Of course it was. I pulled up the file and what I got was 4 minutes and 12 seconds of absolute static. No video, no audio. Just digital noise where there should have been crisp, clear footage of an empty hallway. The cameras before the incident. Perfect. Crystal clear. The cameras aft, also perfect, showing absolutely nothing unusual, just students walking past like it was any other day. But those 4 minutes? Gone. Vanished. Glitched into the quantum void. Fantastic, I muttered, clicking through the adjacent camera angles. Absolutely fantastic. State-of-the-art surveillance system costs more than a small moon, and it decides to take a nap during the one incident that gets flagged as critical. The supplementary report was interesting. Medical Bay had logged 3 students admitted with various injuries. Thaxon Velnir and his 2 constant companions, Drask and Peller, all Krillians from Krill Prime, which is what we call a standard gravity world. Nice place actually. Been there once for a conference. Comfortable, boring, safe. The injuries listed were, and I'm reading directly from the medical file here, 2 fractured manipulator appendages, 1 dislocated joint cluster, severe bruising across 3 different body sections, 1 cracked cranial plate, and something the medical AI flagged as acute stress response consistent with significant physical trauma. For context, these 3 students were engineering majors. Big guys, relatively speaking. Krillians are built solid, good muscle density, decent height. They weren't fragile, and yet, something in that corridor during those 4 missing minutes had absolutely wrecked them. The incident report filed by the students themselves was even more fascinating. According to their official statement, they'd accidentally collided with a maintenance cart and fallen down some stairs, which would be almost believable except for 2 tiny problems. There were no stairs in Maintenance Corridor 7, and our inventory logs showed 0 maintenance carts checked out during that time frame. So someone was lying. The students were lying. The cameras had mysteriously glitched, and the only other person listed as present during the incident window was one Vera Chen, human, first cycle exchange student from Earth, enrolled in advanced engineering with a near-perfect academic record, a human, a Deathworlder, and 3 Krillian students who suddenly couldn't remember how to tell the truth. I leaned back in my chair, all 4 of my eye stalks focused on that corrupted footage timestamp, and I started laughing. Not a happy laugh, mind you, more like the laugh you make when you realize you're about to spend the next several cycles piecing together something that absolutely nobody wants pieced together. Because here's what I've learned in 16 cycles of security work. When the cameras glitch, when the students lie, and when a human is involved, something fascinating happened. And fascinating in a place like Vexler Academy usually means someone made a very, very stupid mistake. Right, so let me back up and paint you the picture of what led to this mess. Because context matters, and also because I had to interview about 20 different students to reconstruct this timeline, which was absolutely as fun as it sounds. Vera Chen arrived at Vexler Academy at the start of the academic cycle as part of Earth's new exchange program. Humans fresh into the Galactic collective, eager to prove themselves, sending their best and brightest to learn alongside the rest of us. Standard procedure for newly integrated species. Nothing unusual there, except, well, humans are weird. And I don't mean that as an insult, I mean it as a statement of observable fact. They're from Earth, which our xenobiologists classify as a Class 12 Deathworld, which is a polite scientific way of saying everything there is actively trying to kill you, including the weather, the wildlife, and probably the plants. Thora was quiet. That's what everyone told me. Quiet, polite, kept to herself, mostly. She'd sit in the back of the advanced engineering lectures, taking notes on her datapad, answering questions when called on, getting perfect marks on every practical exam. 5'5" in human measurements, which translated to average height for her species, dark hair usually tied back, and this utterly unremarkable appearance that made her blend into any crowd. Unremarkable, except for the eyes. Multiple students mentioned this independently, so I'm not making it up. Her eyes had this quality that made people uncomfortable if they looked too long, alert, constantly scanning. Like she was perpetually assessing threats that nobody else could see. Deathworld instincts, probably. When your planet's idea of weather includes lightning storms that can vaporize buildings and predators with enough bite force to crush titanium, you develop a certain awareness. Now, enter Thaxon Velmir and his delightful crew. Thaxon was, according to multiple character witnesses, exactly the kind of student every academy has and nobody wants. Rich family, legacy admission, just enough intelligence to pass his classes without effort, and absolutely convinced that this made him special. He'd been top of his cohort before Vera arrived, coasting on natural talent and that annoying combination of privilege and competence. Then this human shows up and starts casually outperforming him. Not by trying, apparently, just by existing and doing the work. Their engineering professor, a very patient Talaxian named Horvex, told me the tension started building around week 3. They'd been assigned a practical problem: design a propulsion system that could function in high radiation environments. Standard third cycle stuff, challenging but manageable. Vera submitted her design early. Not just early, but with innovations that Horvex, who'd been teaching for 40 cycles, had never seen before. Something about recursive shielding and magnetic field manipulation that made the entire system 30% more efficient. She explained it in class with this matter-of-fact tone, like it was obvious, like anyone could have thought of it. Thaxon's design was good, solid, textbook. It would have been top of the class any other cycle. He got second place, and he did not take it well. She cheated, he'd told his friends loudly in the corridor after class. Not quite loud enough for the professors to hear, but definitely loud enough for Vera, who was walking behind them. Humans just got here. No way they're that advanced. She copied it from somewhere. Vera, according to witnesses, didn't react, didn't speed up, didn't slow down, didn't say a word. Just kept walking to her next class like she hadn't heard a thing, which, and here's where the human behavior gets weird, probably made Thaxon even angrier. Because when you insult someone and they don't react, don't defend themselves, don't even acknowledge you exist, that's worse than fighting back. That's dismissal. That's saying you're not even worth the energy of a response. Over the next few weeks it escalated. Small things, mostly. Thaxon and his crew, Drask and Peller, started sitting near Vera in lectures, making comments just loud enough for her to hear, questioning her answers, implying she didn't belong, suggesting maybe Deathworlders should stick to physical labor instead of engineering. Vera's response: absolutely nothing. She'd sit there, take her notes, ace her exams, and maintain this perfectly calm exterior that apparently drove Thaxon absolutely insane. Professor Horvex noticed, obviously. He's not blind, but here's the thing about academic rivalry at prestigious institutions. Unless someone actually does something actionable, unless there's a direct threat or physical altercation, administration tends to classify it as interpersonal conflict and let students work it out themselves. Character building, they call it. Learning to navigate social dynamics. Yeah. Well, that policy aged spectacularly poorly. By the time we get to cycle day 8047, the day of the incident, tensions were high. Vera had just aced another practical exam, something involving quantum field calculations that she'd completed in half the allotted time. Thaxon had passed, but barely, and he'd been visibly frustrated during the entire examination period. I pulled the cafeteria footage from lunch that day just to see the dynamics. Vera sat alone eating something that looked vaguely toxic but was apparently normal human food. Thaxon sat 3 tables away with Drask and Peller, and all 3 of them kept glancing over at her, having these intense quiet conversations. And Vera? She noticed. Of course she noticed. Those Deathworld eyes tracked every single glance, logged every whispered word she couldn't quite hear. But her expression never changed. She just kept eating, kept reading whatever was on her datapad, kept existing in this bubble of perfect, unshakable calm. Looking at that footage now, knowing what I know happened later, that calm wasn't peaceful. That was control. That was a predator deciding that the annoyances around her weren't worth the energy of a response. Yet, the yet is important. Because patience, even Deathworlder patience, has limits. And Thaxon, in his infinite wisdom, was about to find exactly where that limit was. Oh right. So here's where everything goes sideways, and I mean that literally, because the testimony I collected from the 3 other students who witnessed the beginning of this incident all used variations of the phrase, "It felt wrong." Advanced engineering let out at 60:45 hours. Standard schedule. Vera packed up her materials, nodded politely to Professor Horvax, and took her usual road back toward the residential wing. That road included Maintenance Corridor 7, subsection Delta, because it shaved off about 3 minutes of walking time and most students used it as a shortcut. Thaxon knew this. Of course he knew this. He'd been watching her patterns for weeks, and apparently today was the day he'd decided to do something about his wounded pride. According to Lenara, a Satarian student who'd been walking about 20 meters behind Vera, Thaxon and his 2 friends were already waiting in the corridor when Vera entered. Not hiding, not subtle, just standing there in a loose formation that happened to block most of the hallway's width. Casual, accidental looking, completely intentional. Vera saw them immediately, stopped walking for maybe half a second, did this tiny head tilt that Lenara described as calculating, then kept moving forward at the exact same pace as before. "Hey Chen," Thaxon called out, and Lenara said his voice had this false friendly quality that made her skin crawl. "Got a minute? We wanted to talk about the exam results." Vera stopped about 3 meters away from them, didn't move closer, didn't back up, just stopped and waited, her expression completely neutral, her posture relaxed in a way that Lenara insisted felt deliberately relaxed, like someone consciously choosing to appear calm. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," Vera said. Her voice was quiet even with this Earth accent that made certain words sound clipped, professional, distant. Drask, the bigger of Thaxon's friends, moved slightly to the left, cutting off the angle to the corridor's exit. Not aggressive, technically. Just repositioning. Just happening to make the space feel smaller, more enclosed. Peller shifted right. Same thing. Blocking. Cornering without making it obvious they were cornering. Lenara, watching this from behind, said her first instinct was to go get a professor because the body language was all wrong. The territorial positioning was textbook intimidation, but she hesitated, because nothing had actually happened yet. Nothing she could report, and by the time she'd decided to move anyway, Thaxon started talking again. "See, that's the thing," Thaxon said, taking 1 step forward. "We've been thinking maybe you've had a little too much help with these exams. Outside resources maybe, because humans just joined the collective, 2 cycles ago, and you're suddenly outperforming students who've been studying this material their entire lives." Vera didn't blink, didn't react, just stood there with her arms at her sides, completely still in a way that Lenara described as unnatural, because most species have nervous tells, little movements, fidgeting. Vera had none of that. She was statued. "I've had no help," Vera said. "My work is my own. If you're struggling with the material, I'm sure Professor Horvax offers tutoring hours." Oh, that was beautiful. That was absolutely perfectly calculated to make things worse, and Lenara said you could see Thaxon's face darken, his neck ridges flaring in anger. "Struggling." Thaxon moved another step closer. He was bigger than Vera by a decent margin, had probably 15 kilograms on her, maybe more. "I'm not struggling, Deathworlder. I'm just wondering how someone from a barely civilized backwater planet suddenly knows more than students from actual developed worlds." Now here's where Lenara's testimony gets really interesting, because she said Vera's expression changed. Not much. Just this tiny shift. This microscopic adjustment around the eyes and mouth. The kind of change you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. But Lenara was paying attention, and she described it as watching someone decide something. "You're standing in my way," Vera said. and her voice was somehow quieter than before, which made it worse, made it sharper. "Move, please." Thaxon laughed. Actually laughed. Like this was funny, like he'd just heard the best joke of his life. Drask and Peller joined in. This chorus of dismissive amusement. Or what? Thaxon spread his arms wide, theatrical, playing to an audience that was just his two friends and one increasingly terrified Cetarian witness. "What are you going to do, human? File a complaint? Run crying to the professors?" Vera didn't answer. Just looked at him with those Deathworld eyes, that predator assessment, that absolute stillness that prey animals use right before they bolt or fight. Lenara said. That's when she felt it. This primal wrongness. This instinct, screaming that she was watching something dangerous. Something that was about to go very, very badly for someone. She turned to run for help. Started moving back down the corridor toward where she knew Professor Horvax would still be packing up his classroom materials. She made it maybe 5 steps before she heard Thaxon say something stupid. "Let's see how tough Deathworlders really are." And then she heard the sound of someone grabbing someone else. Physical contact. The line crossed. That's when the cameras glitched. 4 minutes 12 seconds of corrupted footage, and when those cameras came back online, 3 Krillian students were on the ground. Vera was calmly adjusting her jacket, and Lenara was frozen in the corridor, staring back at a scene that her brain absolutely refused to process. So here's the problem with corrupted footage. You can't see what happened, but you can interview witnesses, check medical reports, and piece together a timeline that makes everyone involved extremely uncomfortable. Lucky me, right? This is exactly what I wanted to do with my career. Lenara gave her statement 3 times, each time more reluctantly than the last, and I don't blame her. What she described sounded like a nature documentary gone horribly wrong, except the predator was 5'5" and had been minding her own business until someone made a catastrophically stupid decision. According to Lenara, Thaxon reached out and grabbed Vera's shoulder. Not a gentle touch, not a tap to get attention, a grab. Fingers digging in, proprietary, aggressive, the kind of physical contact that says I can touch you and you can't stop me. Vera's response was immediate, and I mean immediate, like zero delay between stimulus and reaction, the kind of reflex speed that shouldn't be possible for a species that evolved without cybernetic enhancements. She moved. Thaxon's hand was on her shoulder 1 second, and the next second he was bent forward at an angle that looked anatomically improbable, his arm twisted behind his back, his face about 10 centimeters from the corridor floor, making this high-pitched wheezing sound that Lenara initially thought was a mechanical malfunction. That's when I realized, Lenara told me, her voice still shaky 3 cycles later, that I'd never actually seen a human move before. Not really move. Vera had always been so controlled, so careful, like she was deliberately moving in slow motion. But that was normal speed for her. That was what they actually move like when they're not pretending to be like us. Drask, to his credit or more likely his stupidity, tried to help his friend. He moved in from the side, reaching for Vera, probably planning to pull her off Thaxon. He didn't make it. Vera released Thaxon, who dropped to the floor like his strings got cut, and she pivoted. Lenara used that word specifically. Pivoted. Not turned, not spun, but pivoted. Like a weapon system acquiring a new target. Her leg came up in an arc that Lenara's brain registered as physically impossible right up until Vera's foot connected with Drask's midsection. The sound, Lenara said, was like someone hitting a percussion instrument. Loud, hollow, final. Drask flew backwards, not stumbled, not staggered. Flew, hit the corridor wall hard enough to dent the metal paneling, then slid down to the floor, making these wet gasping sounds that meant his respiratory system had temporarily forgotten how to function. Now here's where my security brain starts screaming, because the physics don't work. Ervik, massed maybe 60 kilograms dripping wet. Drask, 90, maybe 95. The force required to move that much mass that distance shouldn't be generatable by something Vera's size. Not without mechanical assistance, not without leverage that didn't exist in that corridor, except Deathworld. Deathworld biology, Deathworld gravity, which is roughly 1.3 times what Krill Prime considers normal. Vera had spent her entire life hauling around 60 kilograms in gravity that would make most species collapse after an hour. Her muscle density, her bone structure, her entire physical architecture was built for an environment that actively wanted to crush her into paste. On a station with standard gravity, she was, effectively, a hydraulic press wearing skin. Peller, demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that gets you killed in nature. decided that 2-on-1 odds looked pretty good and rushed in while Vera was in his mind distracted by Drask's impact with the wall. Vera wasn't distracted. Vera was never distracted. Those Deathworld eyes tracked everything, processed everything, calculated threat priorities faster than our surveillance AI could flag anomalies. She dropped low, something Lenara described as folding, and Peller's momentum carried him right over her. She came up as he passed, elbow rising in an arc that caught him under the jaw with enough force that Lenara heard the crack from 20 meters away. Peller went down. Didn't fly backwards dramatically, just switched off like someone cut his power. 1 second running forward, the next second unconscious on the floor, his jaw already swelling. Faxon was trying to get up, still gasping, still disoriented but trying. He managed to get to his knees, one hand clutching his twisted arm, and he looked up at Vera with this expression that Lenara said was pure disbelief, like his brain couldn't process what had just happened, couldn't reconcile the quiet student who sat in the back of class with the thing standing over him that had just casually dismantled 3 Krillians in under 10 seconds. Vera looked down at him. Still calm, still controlled, and she said in that quiet, even voice that somehow carried through the entire corridor, "I asked you to move." Then she stepped over him, adjusted her jacket which had gotten slightly rumpled during the altercation, and continued walking toward the residential wing like absolutely nothing had happened. Faxon tried to get up, made it halfway to standing, then apparently decided that staying on the floor was the better option and just sat there, breathing, existing, probably reevaluating some life choices. Drask was still against the wall, wheezing. Peller was still unconscious, and Lenara was still frozen in place, her entire understanding of human limitations completely shattered. The cameras came back online at 51 hours and 12 seconds, showing Vera walking calmly down the corridor, 3 Krillian students in various states of disrepair behind her, and 1 Cetarian witness having what I can only describe as a complete existential crisis. Medical response arrived 4 minutes later, alerted by Lenara, who finally remembered how to operate her communicator. By that time, Vera was already in her dormitory, probably doing homework, probably acting like she hadn't just turned 3 students into cautionary tales about picking fights with species you don't understand. The medical team's preliminary report noted injuries consistent with significant kinetic trauma, which is doctor speak for someone hit these students really hard. When asked what happened, Faxon, to his very minimal credit, stuck to the maintenance cart story, probably because admitting the truth meant admitting that one unarmed human who massed less than any of them had turned their attempted intimidation into a physics lesson about force, velocity, and why you don't grab predators. Yeah, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. That's all it took to completely recalibrate the Academy's understanding of what humans were capable of when you pushed them too far. I'd laugh. Except I'm the one who has to write the incident report, and 3 students cornered a Deathworlder and found out doesn't really fit the official formatting guidelines. The medical bay at Vexler Academy is designed to handle pretty much anything short of complete molecular disintegration. We've got regeneration pods, advanced surgical suites, pharmaceutical synthesizers that can create medication for 200 different species, biochemistries, top-notch facility, very expensive, very rarely actually needed because again nothing ever happens here. Until 3 Krillian students showed up looking like they'd argued with a cargo loader and lost. I pulled the medical logs because, well, that's my job, and also because I have a morbid curiosity about how badly someone has to mess up to end up with injuries this comprehensive. Dr. Yelesh, our head medical officer who's seen everything in 40 cycles of practice, filed a report that was absolutely dripping with professional confusion. Faxon, dislocated shoulder, hyperextended elbow, strained ligaments in the wrist and manipulator digits, severe bruising along the arm and shoulder complex, consistent with, and I'm quoting here, joint manipulation by someone with extensive knowledge of Krillian anatomy and sufficient strength to overcome natural resistance. Treatment time 6 hours in regeneration. Prognosis, full recovery. Probable lasting nervousness around humans. Drask, 3 cracked ribs, bruised respiratory organs, minor spinal compression, massive contusion across the entire torso region, consistent with blunt force impact significantly exceeding normal physiological tolerances for species. Translation: someone kicked him so hard his ancestors felt it. Treatment time, 8 hours in regeneration. Prognosis, full recovery. Permanent dent in the corridor wall as a monument to his poor judgment. Pelor, fractured mandible, severe concussion, whiplash injury to the neck structure, 2 chipped teeth, consistent with upward strike to the jaw region with extreme force. He didn't wake up for 3 hours, and when he did, his first words were apparently, "Where is she?" followed immediately by, "Please don't tell her I asked." Treatment time 10 hours in regeneration. Prognosis, full recovery. Lifetime subscription to looking over his shoulder. Dr. Yelish noted in her report, with what I can only describe as barely suppressed amusement, that all 3 injuries were precisely calculated to incapacitate without causing permanent damage, and that the individual responsible demonstrated remarkable restraint and anatomical knowledge. Restraint. She used the word restraint. Vera put 3 students in medical, and the doctor's professional opinion was that she'd been holding back. Meanwhile, administration called Vera in for a statement approximately 2 hours after the incident. Dean Morphix, a Valorian who'd been running this academy for 20 cycles and thought he'd seen everything, conducted the interview personally. "I got the recording because everything's recorded here, and let me tell you, it's a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing while technically answering every question. Miss Chen." The recording starts. Dean Morphix's voice very formal, very careful. "Can you describe what happened in Maintenance Corridor 7 this afternoon?" "I was walking back to my dormitory," Vera replied, and her voice was exactly the same as always. Calm, even, completely unbothered. Taxon Velnir and his friends were blocking the corridor. I asked them to move. They didn't. Taxon grabbed me. I defended myself. Then I continued to my dormitory. "Can you elaborate on how you defended yourself?" I removed his hand from my shoulder and encouraged all 3 of them to reconsider their positioning. Standard self-defense protocols from Earth. Standard self-defense protocols. Like that explained anything. Like that covered the transition from grab to 3 students in medical bay. "Did you intend to cause injury?" "I intended to stop being grabbed and to leave the corridor safely. The injuries were an unfortunate consequence of their decision to initiate physical contact without consent." Dean Morphix tried several more angles, but Vera's answers were all variations of the same theme. She'd been attacked. She'd defended herself. She'd used appropriate force to end the threat. She had no regrets. Completely calm. Completely composed, like she was discussing a mildly interesting homework assignment. The dean eventually let her go with a warning about excessive force, which was hilarious because the footage was corrupted and Thaxon's crew was sticking to the maintenance cart story, so there was no actual evidence of what happened beyond witness testimony and medical reports. But here's the thing about academy environments. Official stories are one thing, but student gossip? That's the real information network. By the next cycle everyone knew. Not the official version. The real version. Lenara had told her roommate, who'd told their study group, who'd spread it across 3 different dormitory wings. The maintenance cart story was dead on arrival because nobody with functional brain cells believed it, and by lunch period, Vera Chen had gone from quiet human exchange student to that Deathworlder who hospitalized 3 Krillians without breaking a sweat. The cafeteria footage from the next day shows Vera sitting alone, same as always, eating her weird human food, reading her datapad. But now there's this bubble of empty space around her. Not hostile, just cautious. Students giving her a respectfully wide berth, the kind of space you give to something you've suddenly realized is dangerous. I watched one Helverian student accidentally bump into her table, then practically teleport backwards apologizing, hands up in a universal "I'm not a threat" gesture. Vera just nodded, said no problem, and went back to her reading. Thaxon and his crew? Different story. They came back to classes after 2 cycles of medical leave, and the change was visible. They sat in the front now, far away from Vera. They didn't make comments. They didn't even look in her direction. When they passed her in hallways, they moved to the opposite wall, gave her space, kept their eyes down. Broken. Some students whispered. Humbled. Others said more charitably,
"I'd call it educated."
They'd learned a valuable lesson about threat assessment and why you don't corner predators, even small ones. Even quiet ones, especially ones from planets where everything is actively trying to kill you. Professor Horvex told me privately that Vera's academic performance hadn't changed at all. Still perfect marks, still innovative solutions, still that same quiet competence. The only difference was that now, when she answered questions in class, students actually listened instead of dismissing her. Respect through violence wasn't the ideal path to integration, but apparently it was effective. The official story stayed official. 3 students, 1 maintenance cart, very unfortunate accident. The academy board accepted it because the alternative meant admitting their security systems had failed, and one of their students had turned into a 1-person tactical response unit. But everyone knew. Everyone. And the unofficial lesson learned that day spread through the academy like wildfire. Humans are polite, humans are controlled, right up until you grab them. Then you find out what Deathworld evolution actually means. And by that point you're already on your way to medical, wondering where your dignity went and why gravity suddenly feels personal. So here I am 3 cycles after the incident, staring at my final security report and trying to figure out how to write our state-of-the-art surveillance system mysteriously failed right when we needed it most. 3 students got absolutely demolished by someone half their size, and now we're all pretending it was a maintenance cart in a way that doesn't get me fired. The official report I submitted was a masterpiece of bureaucratic doublespeak, equipment malfunction, probable electromagnetic interference, student injuries consistent with accidental collision, no further action required, recommend increased maintenance inspection intervals for corridor equipment. Beautiful. Meaningless, completely useless to anyone trying to figure out what actually happened, but I attached a secondary file, flagged for senior administration only, titled Recommended Policy Adjustments Regarding Deathworld Species Integration, because if there's one thing I learned from this entire mess, it's that nobody at this academy had actually thought through what having humans here meant. The policy changes came down 2 cycles later, and they were, in my professional opinion, both hilarious and depressing. First, mandatory orientation for all students on physiological differences and appropriate social interaction protocols for high-gravity species. Translation: don't touch the humans unless you want to learn about pain management techniques firsthand. The orientation included actual footage, not from our incident obviously, but from Earth's combat sports, their military training programs, their extreme athletic competitions. Students watched humans doing things that would hospitalize most species, and doing them recreationally for fun, sometimes while injured. The Krillian delegation formally requested that the orientation videos be toned down because several students had physical stress responses. The request was denied. If you're going to share a campus with Deathworlders, administration decided, you need to understand what that actually means. Second, installation of backup surveillance systems in all corridors, with redundant power supplies and shielded components. Because apparently one mysterious camera glitch was enough to make someone in accounting panic about liability. The new system cost more than my annual salary, which I'm trying not to think about because it's depressing. Third, and this one's my favorite, formal addition of self-defense training to the human student orientation package, with a footnote that such training should emphasize appropriate force calibration for standard gravity environments. Basically, someone in administration watched the medical reports and thought, maybe we should tell the humans to pull their punches. Vera, to her credit, attended the human-specific orientation session they organized. There were 6 human students at the academy that cycle, and according to the coordinator who ran the session, Vera listened politely to the entire "please be careful, you're stronger than you think" presentation, then raised her hand and asked if there was a gymnasium where she could maintain her fitness routine without accidentally breaking equipment. Turns out there wasn't. Earth standard gravity training requires equipment rated for forces that our recreational facilities just weren't designed to handle. So now we're retrofitting an entire gymnasium section with reinforced equipment, more budget allocations, more construction crews, more adjustments to a facility that had worked perfectly fine for 100 cycles before humans showed up and reminded us that fine is relative to your planet's gravity. Well, the social dynamics shifted too. Humans went from curiosity to species you don't mess with overnight. Not feared exactly, but respected in that way you respect anything that could hypothetically turn you into a medical statistics entry but chooses not to because of some admirable commitment to civilized behavior. Vera finished her first cycle with top marks in every class, got invited to join 3 different research projects and had exactly 0 disciplinary incidents after the corridor situation. Thaxon switched his academic focus to theoretical engineering, which conveniently had no practical lab components shared with Vera's schedule. Dusk transferred to a different academy entirely, something about wanting a change of environment. Peller stayed but developed a sudden passionate interest in human culture and history, which I suspect is some kind of trauma response masquerading as academic curiosity. The maintenance cart story is still the official record. Everyone knows it's garbage, but institutional inertia is a powerful force, and sometimes it's easier to maintain a convenient fiction than deal with the complicated reality that one of your students turned into a defensive weapon when threatened and your expensive security system chose that exact moment to take a nap. As for me, I still work security. Still sit in my cramped office. Still watch students do mostly nothing on surveillance feeds, but now I pay special attention to the human students. Not because I think they're going to cause problems, but because I want to make sure nobody's stupid enough to cause problems for them. Deathworlders, man. They come in acting all polite and civilized, fitting in, being model students. And then someone crosses a line and suddenly you remember that civilized is a choice they're making, not a limitation they're bound by. They're not peaceful because they can't be dangerous. They're peaceful because they choose to be, right up until you force them to choose otherwise. The Academy's official position now is that the incident was a learning experience, that integration always has growing pains, and that we're committed to fostering understanding between all species. Very diplomatic, very meaningless. My position? Don't grab the Deathworlders. Seriously, just don't. They've spent their entire evolutionary history on a planet that makes our worst nightmare planets look like vacation resorts. They're strong, they're fast, they're ridiculously durable, and most importantly, they're really good at violence because everything on their planet tried to kill them constantly. But they're also, and this is the weird part, genuinely nice, polite, friendly, willing to help with homework, share notes, explain concepts. They just want to be left alone to do their work, so leave them alone. It's not complicated.
Oh, and one more thing.
Engineering did a full diagnostic on the surveillance system. Couldn't find anything wrong. No electromagnetic interference. No equipment malfunction. No explanation for why those cameras glitched for exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds, which means one of three things. Either we've got the most perfectly timed random failure in the history of electronic systems, someone with serious technical skills deliberately corrupted the footage, or the universe itself looked at what was about to happen and decided that maybe, just maybe, some things are better left unrecorded. Personally, I'm going with option 3. It's more comforting than the alternatives, and I've recommended, purely coincidentally, that we increase our camera maintenance schedule, not because of any specific incident, you understand, just general best practices. The cameras around the human dormitories now get checked twice as often as any other sector, not because we don't trust humans, but because apparently when they're involved, technology develops a sense of dramatic timing. Welcome to Vexlar Academy, where we educate the best and brightest from across the Galactic Collective, and where we learned the hard way that some species need more personal space than others, much more, with consequences measured in medical bay occupancy rates.